In the last part, we have discussed about asymptotic notation. In this part, we are going to discuss about improving the performance of some algorithms. Okay. So, how can we improve the performance of an algorithm? There are several ways or techniques that we can employ to improve the performance of an algorithm or of some algorithms. Okay, not all. So let us see. So first we are going to discuss about the space and time trade-off. Okay. So what does it mean, or what it is telling? So it is telling that the computation of an algorithm may take less time by using more memory. That is, if we allow some more memory in our algorithm, then it might be possible that we can improve the performance or time complexity of those algorithm. Okay. I mean, it is not applicable to all the algorithms, but for some algorithms, obviously, this can be done. Similarly, in the other way around, I mean, if your algorithm is allocated less space, then it may take much time, okay, to execute or complete this execution. So this is what the space-time trade-off says. So it means that in space-time trade-off, if you can allow more space to your your algorithm may perform quicker, okay. And if you allow less space to your algorithm, then your algorithm may perform slower, okay. So let us see some example to understand this idea. So the first example that we are going to see is sieve of Eratosthenes, okay, for primality test. Many of you know this concept, but many of you may not. So if I ask you, I mean, if I give you a number and ask you to write an algorithm to check whether the given number is prime or not. So what we generally do, we will generally write an algorithm where basically there will be a loop for a divisor, and that loop will continue from 2 to n minus 1, and in between, if it divides the number, then you can tell that the number is prime, the number is not prime. Otherwise, if it is not divide, I mean, if the number is not divided by any of the numbers from 2 to n minus 1, then you are going to tell that that is not an that is a prime number, okay. So in that algorithm, what you are doing, you are having a loop, right, which are basically running from 2 to n minus 1 time, or which is basically taking order of n times, right. Now what we can have, in place of running the loop, we can have an sieve of Eratosthenes like this one. So sieve means a table, okay. So what the table is telling, the table is nothing but having or telling that whether a number is prime or not, okay. So it is, the table is containing a true or false value for each index, okay. So for the first index 1, so since 1 is not a prime number, it is having false value. See, now for the index 2, since 2 is having is a prime number, it is having a true value. Since 3 is having a is a prime number, it is having a true value. Since 4 is not a prime number, it is having a false value. Like that, this table will continue. Okay. Now you can understand that if your algorithm is equipped with this sieve of Eratosthenes, you can tell the whether a given number is prime or not, just like that, right? I mean, you do not have to have this loop. You have to just look at that index whether it is having a true value or false value. So if it is a true value, then the number is prime. If it is not a true value, then the number is not prime, right? So that's easy. I mean, that's how easy it is, okay. So see, and now if you have this sieve of Eratosthenes, then your obviously your algorithm is going to take order of 1 or constant time, right, which will not be dependent on the given number. So so you can understand that since you are allowing more memory to your algorithm to hold this table, your your algorithm is going to take less amount of time to finding out whether the number is prime or not, okay. So one point here that I need to mention is that this table sieve of Eratosthenes has to be precompiled within your algorithm, or has to be equipped with within your algorithm. Okay, it is not that your algorithm is creating the table. Okay, since if that is the case, then your algorithm is going to be slower. Okay, so your algorithm will have to be equipped with this table, then only it is going to be perform faster. Okay, let us take another example, like for compressed file storage. So when a file is compressed, okay, it is taking less amount of time, sorry, it is taking less amount of space, right? A compressed file is having less amount of space. Now if you try to perform any operation, like any search operation in that file, then what you have to do, we have to uncompress it first, then you have to search it, and then you have to compress it again. Or if you skip the last compress part, you have to first uncompress it or decompress it to search it, right? So again, in a compressed file you are having less time, less memory, but to perform any operation it is taking much time. Okay, in place of that, if you already have the decompressed file, okay, that decompressed file, you can perform any operation on the decompressed file without compressing it, so that will take less amount of time. Okay, so again, the space and time trade-off can be understood from this example. Similarly, you have done hashing, right? Hashing or B trees. In case of hashing, you can understand that if you do not have hashing, your search, a linear search, can take order of n time, right? But if you are equipped with hashing, then the time complexity is reduced, probably to a constant amount or order of 1. Now, what you have in hashing, you have kind of a hash function which basically directly tells you the index, right? And that hash function generally takes order of 1, and so you can do that easily, right? Now, for hashing also, you need to have the hash table, right? Which is basically having again much memory to give you less algorithm execution time, right? Okay, and the best example of space-time trade-off is probably the dynamic programming. Okay, dynamic programming is an algorithm designing technique which you are going to learn in details. But the brief is that in dynamic programming, we solve the problems which are having overlapping sub-problems. What does it mean? It means that in dynamic programming, a problem is divided into smaller sub-problems, and when we again divide the smaller sub problems again and again, you can find that the sum of the sub problems are appearing more than once, okay, again and again. So that is what the concept of dynamic programming means. So if we consider the uh, recursive definition of Fibonacci number, okay, so if you try to find out the nth Fibonacci number, let us call the function as fn. So how it is defined? So it is defined as fn is equals to f of n minus 1 plus f of n minus 2, right? So f of n minus 1 plus f of n minus 2, right? Now if we solve, if you write the implement this recursive definition of finding out nth Fibonacci number, then you can, if you take an example, you can understand what the overlapping subproblem means and how can we use the space-time trade-off to improve the performance. So if we try to find out what is Fibonacci of 5, so if we do the recursive, if you do the recursive implementation, what will happen? It will recursively call f of 4, right, and f of 3, right? These two recursive call will be made from this f of 5, right? Now f of 4 again will recursively call f of 3, okay, and f of 2, whereas f of 3 will recursively call f of 2 and f of 1, like that. So you can further extend this tree structure to see that how this recursive call is going to be. Okay, so now if you look at these subproblems, so you can find that some of the subproblems like f of 3 is appearing more than once, right? Now, if the problem, I mean, if you try to find out an Fibonacci number which is much higher, like 10th Fibonacci number or 100th Fibonacci number, you will find that this kind of sub problems are appearing so many times. Okay, so similarly, f of 2 also are appearing more than once, and in the recursive solution, in the recursive algorithm, it will be recursively solved each time it is called, right? So what we can do, so we can check, I mean, we can have a table or more memory where we can store these values, right? Once it is computed. So suppose f of 3 is computed first over here, then we can store the value of f of 3 in a table, and whenever it is required later, suppose over here, we can get the value directly from that table. Okay, so that will save us the computation of this part. Okay, we need not further compute this part. Okay, so that is the benefit of dynamic programming, or that is how I mean, dynamic programming is saving us time by using more memory. Okay, so dynamic programming is a great example of space and time trade-off. Okay, so using the concept of space and time trade-off, what we can do, so suppose if you have a problem of like you have an algorithm. Okay, so you have an algorithm which is taking much time because it is using less memory. So you can analyze the algorithm, and you can apply the concept of space-time trade-off to make the algorithm use more memory and solve the problem quicker. Okay, similarly, if you have an algorithm which is very quick but which is using very huge amount of memory, like in TBs, okay, or in terabytes, and probably you cannot allow those kind of memory in your computer, so that kind of excess space will be maybe needed for this algorithm to execute quickly. Okay, so you have an algorithm which works very fast but taking much memory which you cannot allow in your computer. Then again, what you can do, you can use the concept of space and time trade-off, and you can limit the memory that is used by the algorithm by making the algorithm slower. Okay, so this is how you can use the space time trade-off to amplify the speed, or reduce the speed of an algorithm as per your requirement. Okay, uh, okay, so the next part we are looking into is mathemagic, or rather, let us tell it mathematics. And in this part, we are going to see how mathematics are helping us solving, I mean, improving the performance of an algorithm drastically. Okay, so there, this space-time trade-off and mathemagic. There are other ways which I am not discussing in this part, or which I am not discussing. So that include using of problem specific data structure. I mean, some data structure you might derive for a specific kind of problem which can improve the performance of your algorithm. Again, you can again write some efficient algorithm for a problem. Like in case of primary I mean, checking whether a number is prime or not, what you can do, you can have the loop running from 2 to n minus 1, right? Or you can also reduce the loop from 2 to root over of n, right? Which is a much better version, and which will take I mean, comparably very less time when the value of n is higher, right? So that is how you can improve the performance by using some problem specific data structure, by also using some optimized algorithm. But whatever, from my experience, I have found that mathematics is the thing that can drastically reduce the time complexity of an algorithm, and that we are going to see with three examples. Okay, so if I ask you for the first example, that write an algorithm to find out the sum of first n natural numbers. Okay, so what any layman can do in a program is that it will look through from 1 to n, and it will add each of them in a single variable, right? So you will have a sum variable where you are looping through and adding from 1 to n one by one, right? So at the end, the sum variable will have the sum of first and natural numbers, right? So this naive approach is going to take order of n times, right? Now, what a geek will do? So a geek will apply simple mathematics over there, as you know that the sum of first and natural numbers is n into n plus 1 divided by 2, right? So this formula, I mean, just you can implement in your algorithm and find out the sum of first and natural numbers in order of 1. Okay, so that there will be no loop, just the function you have to write in your program. Okay, and you will find that the complexity is reduced from order of n to order of 1. Okay, so that's the power of mathematics. If I take another example, okay, so write an algorithm to find out the count of integers from 1 to n that are divisible by 3 or 5. So this program is asking, so this program will give you a number n, okay, and you have to tell that what are the numbers or how many numbers from 1 to n will be divisible by 3 or 5. So how we'll do, or any naive approach, or how any layman can do is, he or she will basically look through from 1 to n and try to divide that number by 3 or 5, right? And if it is divisible, then he will have a counter, that counter will be incremented by 1. Okay, so it will increment the count by 1. Okay, so whenever it will look through from 1 to n, and whenever it is divisible by 3 or 5, it will just increase the count by 1. Okay, and finally print the count. So how much time this approach is going to take? It is obviously going to take order of n times, right? Now, how a geek will do that, who knows some mathematics? So the geek will apply the set theory, right? So you know that from 1 to n, the number, I mean, the count of numbers which are divisible by 3 is n by 3, right? Again, the number which are divisible by 5 is n by 5. Now, in this two count, what we have? We have those numbers which are basically divisible both by 3 and 5, right? So they are counted twice over here. So we have to reduce those number, right? The intersection numbers. So which is nothing but n by 15, right? So the geek will use this concept of set theory to find out the complexity. Okay, so this formula he can implement in his program and find out the count of those numbers in order of 1 time. Okay, so you can also see over here that the time complexity of this algorithm is drastically reduced by applying mathematics. Okay, and the final example for this, I mean, if I am asking you to write an algorithm to find whether a given number is an exact part of 2 or not, means if I give you a number, suppose 50, you have to tell whether it can be represented in terms of 2 to the power something or not. Okay, so how you can do that? The simple idea or naive approach will be, you will start with 1 and you will check that if 2 to the power, I mean, you will start with I equals to 1 and you will start checking that if 2 to the power I is the number, then you will say, okay, it can be represented by as 2 to the power something, right? But if it is not, then what you will do, you will check that if 2 to the power I is less than the given number. So if it is less than the given number, then what you will do, you will increase the I by 1 and again check that whether 2 to the power I is the number or not. So in this way we will continue until 2 to the power I becomes greater than the given number. Okay, so in that loop, I mean, you are basically having the power, I mean, as a loop variable, and you are increasing the power 1 by 1 and checking whether 2 to the power I is equal to that given number or not. So if you find that at some point of time that it is a given number, fine, you can tell it. Now if in the loop and you find that value of I has reaches the value where the 2 to the power I has become greater than the given number, then you obviously stop the program, right? So then you can tell that this is not exact power of 2. So how this, I mean, how much time this algorithm is going to take? So you can see that the algorithm is going to take order of log n by 2, log n base 2 time. Why? Because you are every time multiplying it by 2, right? Or uh, multiplying, or you are trying to find out the number is a power of 2. Okay, so the loop will be continued log n times. Okay, Now, how can Geek will do that? A Geek will use some bitwise operator to find out the answer in order of one time. Okay, so what he is doing? So he is doing like he is returning not in, this is bitwise and n minus 1. So what it is telling? So see, any 2 to the power I, so, any number which is an exact power of 2, and if you represent it binary, we'll have the format is like 1 0 0 0 like that. So suppose if you take any number which is a 2 to the power, which can be which is an exact power of 2, like if you take 2 which is 1 0, right? If you take 4 which is 1 0 0, if you take 8 which is 1 0 0 0, right? So any power of 2 value in binary is represented by 1 0 0 0, and the number just before it is nothing but all the ones. Okay, so for 2 we have 2 minus 1 is 1, which is represented as 1, right? Now if you have 4, okay, the value of n minus 1 is going to be 3, which is 1 1. And now if you have 8, right, which is 1 0 0 0, and n minus 1 is 7, so 7 is 1 1 1. Now if you perform bitwise AND over here, you will get it 0, right? You will get all the bits as 0. So you know that 0 means false in C or in most of the programming language, right? So 0 means false and non-zero means true. Now this scenario will happen only if the value of n is your exact power of 2. Otherwise this bitwise AND operator will never give you 0. Okay, so otherwise it is giving you some non-zero number. Okay, otherwise it is giving you some non-zero numbers, which essentially means as true, right? But what we have to return, we have to return that whenever it is exact part of 2, we have to make it true, and whenever it is not an exact part of 2, we have to make it false. So what we are doing, we are just adding a not in front of it. Okay, so that is what it is done. So return not n and n minus 1. Okay, so you can now see that this is going to take order of 1 as well. Okay, in place of order of log n. So again, mathematics has the power to reduce drastically the complexity of your program. Okay, so this is the part where we have discussed about improving the performance of an algorithm. In the next part, we are going to see the recurrence relation, and we are going to see the way to solve those recurrence relations. Okay, uh, so this will again the part that will require to analyze recursive algorithms. Okay, now if we as a subtitle, I have written that remember the story of Inception movie. So if you haven't seen the movie Inception, just go watch it before I give you the